Okay, thank you so much, guys, for coming today. We're doing lecture 16 already, material for the final exam. And we're going to talk about the spinal cord, and we're going to talk about reflexes at the end. Okay, I was just looking a little while ago, the next math module, you had trouble with the layers that cover the brain, the meninges. You know, there's three of them: the gyromater, pia mater, and the arachnoid, which is in the middle. And then above the gyromater is the epidural space, and you were supposed to arrange them in order. And a few guys had trouble with that. And also, we talked about one of the reflexes, and we kind of covered it at the end, the Golgi tendon reflex, and you guys were supposed to put it in the steps. It's pretty much just like the homeostatic mechanisms we did last time, okay, for the reflexes. So we'll kind of try to go through that. All right, very good. So we'll pretty much start off talking about the characteristics of the spine, and then also the regions that it's divided into, and then of course the number of cranial spinal nerves that come out of it. There's 31 pairs. Okay, all right, and of course you know, the link between the central nervous system, including the spine and the brain, right, is those peripheral system nerves, right? So that's you know, is a major communication between the rest of the body, the periphery, and the central nervous system, which is the control center, right? Okay. And so the spinal cord, what it does is it sort of integrates a little bit. It does a little bit of processing of these spinal nerves against the spinal reflexes, but they are also ascending and descending tracts going to and from the brain that will edit these reflexes. Sometimes these reflexes are, exacerbated or kind of sort of accentuated, if you will, or sometimes they're toned down, depending on what the brain decides. But the spine does a bit of that integration right in there, because they're also interneurons. Okay, the sensory nerve will bring in the information, then there will be an interneuron right in the spine, and then a motor nerve comes out. And those are the dorsal and ventral roots, respectively. And also, we had a few problems with that too, in terms of those two parts that form the. Can you see anything? Okay, so like I was saying, you see that the spinal column, the spinal cord, or the spine is not same diameter throughout. Okay, there are certain enlargements that are strategically located. So there's one in the neck with the cervical area, the neck area, and you can see whenever there's an enlargement, that's where you have the nerves going to the limbs. Like the cervical enlargement will control the upper limbs, right? So the cervical enlargement will be right there, okay? And then, so that's the cervical region there, and there's about 8 of those nerves, spinal nerves on either side of it. And then the thoracic region, okay, would have about 12 spinal nerves. And then, of course, the lumbar region is also got the lumbar enlargement. And guess what is going to be controlled by the nerves coming out of the lumbar enlargement? The lower limbs, okay? So there's just a lot of those limbs. I mean, a lot of the nerves coming out, I mean, for obvious reasons, to control the limbs. And then in the next lecture, we'll be talking about plexuses, which is how a bunch of the nerves coming from the lumbar and cervical enlargement are arranged up, because there's just too many of them. They have to be well organized. So those are called plexuses. And you'll see the next lecture will say plexuses, spinal, spine, and plexus, and nerves. Okay, so we'll talk about that next time. But the lumbar enlargement, of course, controls the lower limbs. Okay, and then of course the sacral region, and the lumbar region is 5 spinal nerves coming on either side, pairs, and then the sacral region is the tail end, and you can see how it tapers off like that, and it also has 5. Okay, how many does that make? 20, 30, but there's 31. Where's the other one? The other one is the last one, which is the coccygeal. It's just denoted as C0 like that. Okay, that makes 31 total. Okay, and it's not a region because there's only one spinal nerve coming out of there. Okay, there are other ones. There are regions because they've got several, right? And the biggest region, of course, is the thoracic, right? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the structure here, of the spine. Right? This will just pretty much show you a little bit of what we just talked about. You get the cervical enlargement, upper limbs, and then of course the lumbar enlargement. So from here you get the lumbosacral plexus, which is a whole bunch of nerves that give rise to the tibial nerve, the sciatic nerve, all those nerves controlling the. And then here you get the cervical. In the cervical region, you get the brachial plexus. You know, the brachial, like the muscles we've been talking about, anything to do with the brachial is to do with the artery. So brachial plexus controls, and also the phrenic nerve comes from this region too. The phrenic nerve that controls the diaphragm. Okay. So, and we'll talk about the plexus next time. Okay. So, like I was saying, the spinal cord does not go through all the way through the spinal column. It falls short. It's shorter than the spinal column. Okay, than the stake of the vertebra. It's shorter than that. And then also it tapers into what is called the conus medullaris, or medullary cone, if you like, the English word. Okay, medullary cone, which is this, it kind of tapers like that. So that's this medullary cone, and then of course this is the lumbar joint, and then this is the spine. Okay, and the cranial nerves coming out of the lumbar enlargement form something like this. What does it look like to you? Tail of something? Anybody got horses at home? It looks like a horse's tail, doesn't it? It does. And I'll show you another diagram. The next time you see horses, look at their tail. It looks like that, okay? And that's why it's called Cauda Equina. Cauda means back, okay? Tail ends. Equina, equine, horses. Cauda Equina is because the spinal nerves that come out of the lumbar enlargement look like a horse's tail. So that's why it's called that. So sometimes I ask about, which is Cauda Equina, tail horse. Okay? Ask about the characteristics of the spine when you talk about that, how it doesn't go through all the vertebral column, how it has all these enlargements in the cervical and the lumbar region, and how it has the nerves coming out of the lumbar region look like a horse's tail, Cauda Equina. And the medullary cone, of course, it tapers into a sharp cone, cone-shaped structure. Of course, this is the, and it looks more like a horse's tail here. See, this is an actual, kind of, these are good pictures. That's why I like to include these in there. Alright? And those, that's where, you see here, it typically looks like in the diagram form, you can actually see how it looks like a tail of a horse. So that's why it's called Cauda Equina. Alright? So cervical enlargement gives rise to the brachial plexus and the lumbosacral plexus over here. Alright? Very good. So, continuing on again, like we said, 31 spinal nerves coming on either side of the spine, with 12 in the thoracic region is the longest region, okay, and then 8 in the neck, and then 5 each in the sacral and lumbar regions, right? Okay, and then we talked about how we have the cervical and lumbosacral enlargements, and this serves upper limb, and this serves the lower limb. Okay. All right. So the lower limbs, there's 2 of each. Okay. All right. So there you go. And then of course the nerves in the lumbosacral enlargement form a horse's tail. It's called Cauda Equina. Look at that. All right. So those are the characteristics, and like I say, it's shorter than the vertebral column. Okay. And then of course functions is to generate the spinal reflexes, do a bit of integration and processing of these reflexes, but the final instruction will come from the brain. Okay, and then we'll talk about some of those tracts that go up and down to control these spinal reflexes, right? Okay, so this is where we had our little problem in the LensMat module. So the dura mater is the toughest connective tissue membrane I've seen so far in the body. You try to cut through that thing, it's tough as nails. Okay, and we're going to do it when we dissect the brain in next week, so it's going to be nice. Okay, and it protects the brain. Of course, it's very tough, very tough. Dura means hard matter. Okay, it's a very tough connective tissue membrane. Okay, and you know, so you know how this is. What is this? What's that? That's a vertebra, right? Is it that bad? Okay, and then so that would be the dura mater right there. Okay, and then above the dura is a space called the epidural space. That's where they deposit anesthetic. You know, if you're pregnant and you don't want to feel anything down there, they put it right in there. Okay, and this was your module that I had you put this in order from superficial to deepest. Okay, so here, this is the bone, right? This is the vertebral foramen, foramen, right? So there's going to be the membrane covering it outside, which was called the periosteum, right? Remember from our bones, we did that. Okay, just not so long ago. Okay, and so I'm gonna color, and then so the periosteum is the covering the bone, and then there's gonna be fat between the dura mater and the periosteum, and that's what, and that fat is for obvious reasons to cushion, right? And this fat is in the epidural space. Okay. Okay, so we start off with our little periosteum covering the vertebral foramen, then we have the epidural space. Okay, so we got the epidural space here, and then the periosteum covering on the top, then the dura mater, then under the dura mater will be the what? The subdural space. Sub is under. Subdural space. This was your module again. Okay? Subdural space. And then the arachnoid mater is so called because it looks like a spider's web. Arachnids are spiders. So it looks like a spider's web. Okay? So that's why it's called arachnoid mater. And under the arachnoid is the subarachnoid space. Just like the subdural space. So subarachnoid space, and what's in there? Fluid, right? Cerebrospinal fluid. And it's continuous with the head, brain as well, and it cushions the brain. So we get the fat in the epidural space. Okay, there's cushioning the vertebral column because it's literally inside of bone, right? The vertebra. And then we got the dura mater, which is the toughest connective tissue I've seen so far in the body, protecting the spinal column. All right. So when the spinal nerves come out, they have to come out through these layers to get out through the intervertebral foramina. You know those spaces that are created when you stick the vertebra. Okay, those little holes. That's where the spinal nerves come out. Okay. And then the innermost, of course, is the pia mater, which is rich in blood vessels. Okay, and it's very intimately connected with the brain. When we dissect the brain, next time you probably won't see it, you will just see the dura mater because everything is stuck to the brain. The pia mater will be really stuck to the brain. Okay, you may see a bit of the arachnoid a little bit, but it's also will be stuck on this pia mater right here. So subdural space, okay, and then arachnoid. Arachnoid, under it is the subarachnoid space with cerebrospinal fluid. From the top, then you've got the periosteum outside epidural, and then the dura mater, subdural space, arachnoid mater, and then the subarachnoid space with the cerebrospinal fluid for cushioning again. and then the pia mater is the innermost. Okay, so that was in your little schedule. Okay, and then of course the epidural space is the space above the dura mater, and it's covered with fat padding. I'm going to remove a bit of my vertebra so you can see it properly. Okay, and then of course the periosteum, like I said, is on the outside, lining the vertebral foramen, because it's bone, is the membrane covering bone. Okay, so if you're really going to be very superficial, you say periosteum, epidural space with the fat, and then the dura mater. Right. Underneath it will be the arachnoid mater, then subarachnoid space with the cerebrospinal fluid, which is also continuous with the brain, and it cushions your brain as well. Then underneath that will be the pia mater, which is the innermost. Okay, so that's the order of those guys. And of course, I want you to know these membranes and be able to kind of describe them. The meninges, the dura mater, which is the outermost and the toughest, and then the arachnoid mater, which is the middle one and it looks like a spider's web, and then of course the pia mater, which is pia means affectionate, so it's one that's really closely attached to the brain. Right? Very good. And then of course the subarachnoid space is full of cerebrospinal fluid, and that cushions the brain. Do we have a class? Yeah. Okay. So that's that. So know all these spaces and know what is in there in these spaces, what occupies those spaces, and of course, like the order in which they are, from superficial to deep, or deep to superficial, whichever. Right? So that's that. All right. So far, we've covered the characteristics of this spine, and then of course those membranes that cover the spine, also continuous with the brain, also cover the brain. And then when we do the brain, we also do the meninges. Okay? So when you get meningitis, those are the membranes that are inflamed by bacteria, okay, in the brain. And that really not good. Okay? And then so the use of the dura mater. So like I was saying earlier on, the spinal nerves, they don't just start from the spine and it just comes out. You know, like this. No, it starts off as actually rootlets, like a lot of rootlets on the side of the spine, and then those rootlets will combine to form the ventral root on the bottom and the dorsal root on the top. So the dorsum means, it's a Latin word meaning back. Dorsum. Okay, so that's why this is the dorsal root. You see that starts here, and the dorsal root is carrying sensory information. Okay, the dorsal root is carrying sensory information, and I'll show you more big diagrams like this. Okay, it's carrying information to the spine, so it's carrying sensory neurons. The thing about the sensory neurons is that just before they get into the spine, they will sync up with another neuron. Okay, so we have a neuron there, and then it synapses with another one that finally goes there. Okay, and that's why you have a ganglion, you have a cell body. It's called the dorsal root ganglion. Okay, dorsal root ganglion, because it doesn't just enter the spine; it will synapse with another neuron that finally finishes. Okay. Now the ventral root also starts off with rootlets. Bit of rootlets, and when we dissect the brain, you'll be able to see that. And then the rootlets will combine to form the ventral root. Okay, so this is the ventral. Okay, ventral and dorsal are referring to a four-legged, a quadrupedal animal like so. Okay, so ventral is anterior in the bipedal animal like us. So sometimes that ventral root is called the anterior root, and then the dorsal, which is the back, dorsal. So this is called the dorsal. Dorsal, from the word dorsal, meaning back in Latin. Okay, so, and that is also called the posterior. Okay, because posterior is back here, in a bipedal animal, anterior is back here. Okay, so sometimes they interchangeably, for the most part, we use ventral and dorsal. Okay. All right. So just so you know from now. So of course this is the epidural space. So pregnant moms, this is where the anesthetic is deposited into the epidural space. Right. So when you're having it, you probably have it go like this, or hold your knees like that, so that those spines they go like this, spread out a little bit, so they can go in. So you really have to know your anatomy.
Is it true that it has consequences?
Sometimes if you they do it, if you have a problem and it kind of sort of does something, you might infect your fluids, the fluids that's in there. But usually you're okay because it doesn't. But sometimes screwy things happen every now and then. But you don't feel pain when you get pain. Yeah, I haven't done it before, so I don't know how it feels like. But I'm sure it helps. Okay, so spinal cord cross section. We're gonna show you. I'm gonna show you a lot of these cross sections. Okay, so remember I said the sensory neuron comes in, and so it will have a cell body in there, and then that will synapse with an interneuron, the one that's in between the sensory and the motor neuron. So those cell bodies are located in the gray matter, right in the middle. On the outside of the spine, on the periphery, will be the white matter, or those myelinated axons forming those ascending tracts, carrying information to the brain, and descending tracts, carrying information down to those to control those reflexes. Right? So that's what that is. The white matter on the outside, and then it's divided into columns. The white matter, the tracts of axons going up and down to the brain. So, and those are the columns called fasciculi, which are the smaller bundles, and funiculi, which are the bigger bundles, okay, of those tracts, okay. So it's kind of gonna look like this, okay, and then this is our spine, okay, and then it will have those little horns, okay. So this will be the gray matter, and then you have your little, and then your dorsal ganglion there, spine goes in there. And then so there will synapse in here, and then you have an interneuron, okay, and then the motor neuron comes down here, okay. So this is going that way, and this is going this way, okay. So this is the gray matter in the middle, and soon enough I'll be talking about these horns. You see, this is the dorsal horn, right? These two are the dorsal horns, and they will be coming from the side as well. And the dorsal horns are on the sensory side, right? Because this is the sensory neuron coming. So the dorsal horns will carry cell bodies of sensory neurons that then connect to these interneurons in the middle. See that? Because I'll be talking about that in a minute. And then the white matter will be on the outside here, okay? And then this white matter is arranged in these big columns here, okay? On the sides, over here, over here. So all this is white matter surrounding, carrying all those tracts going up and down to the brain, to and from the brain. All right? So that consists of the descending and ascending pathways. Okay. And so we know what white matter is. I think we described it last time when we were talking about, the neurons and the nervous system. So we know about that already. We know that only axons can be myelinated. And when they're in the central nervous system, they're called tracts, right? And when they're outside, they're called nerves. Okay? So, like I was saying, those dorsal horns, they are next to the sensory neuron, so they're going to carry cell bodies of sensory neurons. That then will do what? Synapse with these guys in. Oh, I tell you. You know what I'm saying? I put this is an interneuron right there. It's between the sensory, for the most part, and the motor going out. Okay? And then one thing I didn't say is that the motor neuron and the sensory neuron will unite outside of the spine, like here, to form the spinal nerve. Okay, so the definition of a spinal nerve is the union of the dorsal and ventral roots. Okay, and I'll show that later on. Okay. All right. So now we get these ventral horns, right? On the ventral horns are next to the motor, right? the ventral horns, which are these guys, are next to the motor neurons. So the cell bodies of motor neurons going to the somatic muscles, to the skeletal muscles. So somatic motor neuron cell bodies are located in the ventral horns. Okay? So we did the dorsal, and then we did the ventral. Then there will be these lateral horns. You see these lateral horns on the side? All that is gray matter, right? We're talking cell bodies here, so it's gray matter. So these ones, they are almost next to this motor side as well, and they will carry neuron cell bodies of, the autonomic motor neurons, okay? That control things like the blood vessels, the small intestine, anything that's automatically controlled will be carried by the autonomic motor neurons. Okay? Anything that is voluntarily controlled, like the skeletal muscles, will be the somatic motor neurons. Okay? So the lateral ones will carry the autonomic motor neuron cell bodies. All right? So, because in the exam I'll ask, okay, what is located in the ventral horns or the dorsal horns, the lateral horns, okay? And the commissure is a word that means connect or communicate. So the one half of the spine is connected to the other half by tracts that crisscross between the two. Just like the brain, the cerebrum, left and right, is connected by tracts that crisscross with it, and they're called, one of them is called the anterior commissure as well. So the gray and white commissures, of course, will attach the halves, the two halves of the spine. So this half here will be connected by those commissures that crisscross from one to the next. Okay? So commissure is to connect. Okay, so I want you to know these horns and what kind of cell body they have, what their purpose of the cell bodies. Okay, and then of course you know white matter and the gray matter, and then the ascending tracts going up and down from to and from the brain. Okay? Alright, very good. So now I'll show you again that picture. Like I said, the ventral and the dorsal horn roots, they don't just start directly. They start as a bunch of rootlets and a bunch of rootlets. The rootlets will combine to form the ventral and the dorsal root. The dorsal root and the ventral root will combine to form the spinal nerve. Okay. Then it comes out through that vertebral foramen. Okay. So these are the rootlets of the dorsal. So the dorsal going towards the CNS, and then the motor going away from it. And then of course here on the dorsal, we've got the cell body right here. It will synapse with another neuron. Okay, something like that. Actually, this is here, and then this is the cell body. Okay, so that's the dorsal root ganglia. All right, and then of course the gray matter is in the middle, and then you've got your dorsal horns, lateral horns, and ventral horns. All right, and then of course the white matter flanks the is on the periphery. It surrounds the gray matter. And then you have those columns. Funiculi are the bigger columns, fasciculi are the small columns. Right? Fascicule plus will be singular, funiculus is singular. With an I, it's plural. Okay? Because if you see those words, if we are talking singular, people wonder, okay, what the hell is that? It's the same thing, okay? It's just in Latin words, that's how they do it. The plural is not putting an S and an S. It's removing a whole bunch of stuff. So, spinal cord, cross section, we got the spinal nerves, okay, that are formed, okay, after you've got rootlets first. The rootlets start off, then they combine to form the ventral and the dorsal roots. Then the dorsal root and the ventral roots combine to form the spinal nerve. Okay, which is that. And basically, this is the definition of a spinal nerve, right? If I ever ask about defining a spinal nerve in the exam, you simply say it's the union of the dorsal and the ventral roots. That's it. Okay. And then those ventral and dorsal roots, they originate from the spine as rootlets. It doesn't originate as one simple strand. It has a bunch of rootlets, and it has the ability to then connect with the wider area of the spinal cord, okay? And then it combines to form the roots, dorsal and ventral, which then combine to form the spinal nerve, right? By definition, that's what the spinal nerve is, literally. Combination of trigger happy. So this is it right there. You can see, because we're looking from the back, we're looking this way, you know, from the back, so we can easily see readily the dorsal rootlets, right? Doesn't mean that the ventral rootlets are smaller or whatever or lacking. They're just behind, they're occluded, they are covered by this. Okay? See how it is? There's some, in the other diagrams you can see them, but anyway, they are kind of like the same bundle. There's no difference. It's just that these ones are right in the top, the front. I mean, from where we are looking from the back. We're looking from the back, looking that way. Alright? So that's that. And those are the dorsal and ventral rootlets. Okay? You can see here, it's just the same amount of rootlets. You get the dorsal rootlets here, the ventral rootlets over here. I like this because they highlight a specific part so you can see how it's related to the whole thing. Alright? And then, of course, the ventral rootlets unite to form the ventral root. And then the dorsal rootlets unite to form the dorsal root, which then combines with the ventral root to form the spinal nerve. You see, the spinal nerve starts after they combine. And then, of course, this is the dorsal root ganglia. Somebody in the morning once asked, how come the ventral root doesn't have a ganglia? Well, the reason why the ventral root doesn't have a ganglia is that it will synapse very close to the organ. Let's say it's the liver that's being controlled, right? So this is the motor neuron or whatever gland it may be. Okay, it will synapse very close to the organ. So the cell body will be located close to the organ that's being controlled. Okay, whereas the one coming in will synapse right before it gets into the spine. So you see the dorsal root. Okay. Usually it takes 2 neurons to reach whatever body part. Okay, the presynaptic and the postsynaptic. Okay. So the presynaptic neuron, sensory neuron, is much longer than the postsynaptic neuron, the one that goes into the spine. And here's the opposite. Okay, the presynaptic is the presynaptic is very long. The postsynaptic, that's close to the organ, is short. So that's why you don't see the ventral ganglia. It's way close to the organ that's being controlled. Again, dorsal and ventral roots. Okay, pretty much the union of those rootlets. Okay, that's that. Right. And then the dorsal root and the ventral root combine to form the spine, and then there's the ganglia right there. You see, this is in an actual. You can see how it cuts through the, the vertebra here, and that's the intervertebral foramen. Okay, so this one now shows you a diagram of the cross section again of the spine, looking at it from the side, and you can see these columns, ascending columns going to the brain. So those will be the big folliculi, and then the smaller columns within these columns, those will be the fasciculi, the smaller columns of these axons. So that's what is the fasciculi. And of course, the descending ones are red because they're motor. They're carrying information to cause something to do something, so that's why they're red. So motor, doing something, okay, and that's that. And you can see the rootlets combine to form the ventral and the dorsal roots, which then combine to form the spinal nerve. And I think that's a cross section. Okay, so moving on. So the dorsal root, of course, contains sensory neuron, which means information going towards the CNS, towards the spine. Okay, and we said it will synapse right here, another neuron that goes in there, the synapse is here. So this will be the dorsal horn carrying those cell bodies of sensory neurons, all right, which then will synapse right here with an interneuron, which is right here. Okay, and then this will be the motor neuron going out like that. Okay, and like I said, you then have the cell bodies of somatic motor neurons. Okay, somatic motor neuron right in the dorsal, in the ventral horn. And then this is the lateral horn. See the blue one? The cell body of this goes to the automatic or automatically controlled or the autonomic, body parts like the blood vessels and whatnot. So that's the autonomic motor neuron. Okay. And then I think there's two types of reflexes. I don't know if I showed it already. Maybe I haven't shown it. We're going to have somatic reflexes that control skeletal muscles. Then we're going to have, autonomic reflexes that control the digestive system, the blood vessels, and so on. Anything automatically controlled, right? Those reflexes are, ones that control it. Okay, and this is also that you don't have to think about, like, say you've eaten a meal, you want the motility, you want the secretions, all that digestive activity to be done automatically, right? You don't have to think, okay, I'm going to secrete some juices now, then I'm going to, you'll be going mad. Because in the meantime, you want to be doing something else. Maybe you're watching a movie, for instance, like when you're eating popcorn, right? So you want the digestive activities to go reflex action, and everything is automatically controlled, and then you have a few other things you can do. So that's the function of reflexes. And for the most part, the somatic one, reflexes are to limit tissue damage. So the ventral root, of course, is motor neurons. That's what's going on, and controlling muscles and glands. Okay, so and that's that. We've already done that. And then, of course, spinal nerves are mixed. All the nerves are mixed because they will have sensory neurons and they will have motor neurons. So they're all mixed. All those nerves, they carry both. So they're called mixed nerve. And by definition, of course, this defines as a nerve, a union of the dorsal and ventral roots, or sensory and motor neurons. So it's mixed. So they are mixed nerves because they carry sensory and they carry motor information, right? Motor neurons and the sensory neurons. Right. That's how we define this a spinal nerve. So now that we've talked about how it's all organized and how these nerves are coming out, we now talk about the reflexes, right? And then there's several of which I'm going to show examples of right here. Okay, and then we'll talk about the Golgi tendon organ, which was in the body. Because we're supposed to do these steps in the body. Okay, and it's pretty much a homeostatic mechanism. So for this, I want you to know the kind of receptor for that reflex, and then what are the neurons involved. Neuron, sensory, interneurons, motor, or whatever. Some of them are simple, like the stretch reflex is gonna, not have interneurons. So these reflexes are stereotypical and very, defined, unconscious, involuntary activity that happens automatically without you any input from the individual. Okay, stereotypical just means something that is simple and set. Okay. Just like the common stereotypes that people have of, certain things. It's like a preconceived idea. It may not be correct, but it's set. So those are the same with the reflexes. They are set, and they automatically controlled, no voluntary input. And of course, everything is to maintain homeostasis. All these things, whenever you're sensing the internal or external environment and giving an output out of that sensory information, you're trying to maintain a stable environment because you're reacting to what's going on the outside so that your internal environment is not altered too much. But then you go out of your optimum conditions to operate, the physiology is going to be affected. All right. Like I was saying, you've got two types of reflexes. The somatic reflexes will control muscles. Remember, somites become muscles in the growing fetus. So somatic will control muscles, skeletal muscles specifically, right? And they're normally involved in removing body parts from painful stimuli, okay? So that you limit tissue damage. Like right now I'm walking barefooted, okay? I step on a tack or broken glass, immediately I'm gonna withdraw, right? Otherwise, if I keep stepping on that tack, it's gonna keep going deeper and deeper and keep causing more damage. Okay, so you want to reduce damage. So remove body parts from painful stimuli and keep the body from suddenly falling. Like right now, I'm already doing a stretch, the stretch reflex, which keeps my legs straight. Okay, because when you're bent like this, the stretch reflex, if you do the patella, which is I'm going to show you, this one already should have shown you to cause me to stand up for posture. Okay? Otherwise, I'll be buckling down and falling. Okay, so to keep from suddenly falling, and then of course, if there's an external force applied to you, let's say somebody comes and punches you, which direction do you fall? Do you go? He punches you from the front, you go this way. That's what happens. It's a reflex action. Nobody's ever been punched from the front and they fall forward. No, because then you meet it and then you'll be like a collision, and then that'll be really bad. So again, it will cause an opposite direction from the an external force. You move in the opposite direction. So that's all reflex. Okay? If you're going to fall, you probably fall backwards. If I come from behind and I nudge you from behind, you go that way. So cause movement because of external forces. Okay? In the opposite direction from where the force is coming from. Makes sense, right? And then automatic, autonomic, anything automatically controlled like the visceral, blood vessels, visceral meaning, soft internal organs like the digestive system, blood vessels, the heart, all those smooth muscle. Okay, so blood pressure, think that, carbon dioxide, smooth muscle in the respiratory system. You know how you get rid of carbon dioxide and get oxygen. Okay, and water intake, so forth. Okay, controls those glands and antidiuretic hormone, dorsal, and all those things that maintain water balance. So, think digestive, think blood pressure, think all that for automatic reflexes. Somatic, think muscles, removing yourself from painful stimuli or reacting from an external force. Okay, because I will ask about the two types of reflexes and the kinds of uses for each. Okay, what the purpose of it is, somatic reflexes, okay, moving from painful stimuli, and of course automatic, controlling things like blood pressure, so digestive activities, things like that. Okay, so they fall under that same thing, okay, of autonomic. So, know these two main reflexes, know what the purpose of reflexes, which is to maintain homeostasis, right, in the first place. And then you have the muscles, the skeletal muscle ones, and then you have the soft internal organs, the visceral, somatic and autonomic. Okay, like we've seen this before, right? When we did the homeostasis, nothing new right here. Okay, just like you had to order the events in a Golgi tendon reflex, which we're going to do in a little bit in the module. Okay, it's the same thing. It's nothing new. So for these reflexes, you should know the homeostatic mechanism already. So you know that already. And all you need to do is know, okay, what is the receptor for that reflex and what is the purpose of that reflex. That's it. But this you know already. Because we know that you need a sensory receptor to gather the information, and then that information has to be conducted to the central nervous system by the sensory neurons. And then in the central nervous system, you have interneurons that will pass the information and integrate, and put it to where it's most properly taken care of. Then it will go, after the feedback has been generated, goes through the motor neuron to the effectors, which could be muscles, glands, whatever. Okay, so that's homeostatic mechanism. Those are the effectors. So you know this already. Okay, this is nothing new. We've done this before. Okay. Because we said, after all, the purpose of reflexes is to maintain homeostasis. It's a homeostatic mechanism. That's what it is. Okay, nothing new. So we know about this already. Okay, so now we start with just a general definition of a reflex. It includes a reflex arc, which is like a continuation from the receptor, sensory, and then interneuron, then motor. So that's the arc we're talking about. Okay, so you have your sensory information, you've got your receptors here, whatever it is, pain receptors, touch receptors, whatever it is. And then it will take the information there, you've got a little synapse there, then it will, of course, almost most of the time, synapse with an interneuron that kind of moves information within the spine, and then some of that information is also sent to the brain. And you will see all the reflexes we talk about, you see the ascending pathways and descending pathways. That's how it's connected. And then the brain does the final editing of all the reflexes that we're going to talk about. Okay, so of course, again, this is simply a homeostatic mechanism. You have a stimulus, or a change happens. Okay, like stepping on a tag, and then a receptor called a nociceptor or pain receptor will pick that up, send it through a sensory neuron to the brain, and then of course the brain will it will synapse with interneurons and so forth, go to other parts of the brain, take care of it and process it. Then a response is generated, and then you need a motor neuron to take that response to the effectors, which could be muscles, glands, and so forth. So that's it. The loop, receptor, sensory neuron, and then interneuron in the middle to do that processing or integration, integrative function of the nervous system, and then of course the motor neuron getting the information and instructions to the effector organs, which could be muscles, glands, blood vessels, whatever. Okay, and then that's the 5 steps of a homeostatic mechanism. So nothing with there, right? So of course, if you go there, okay. So now we're going to start with our first example, and then we'll talk about the grip. Is it going to work here? Or I'm stuck? It won't do. Maybe I'll do that. And because it's reset. Maybe I need to drop that off in the tray. Okay, so remember we talked about it last time and it was in the exam. We talked about how some neurons will gang up on one, and that's a converging pathway. Remember we talked about it? And you probably answered it. And then, or you can have one will synapse with many, and that's diverging, right? So that's the same way you're going to have these neurons and interneurons diverging with a whole bunch of ascending tracts and descending tracts, so that the information is taken to the brain, different parts of the brain, processed, and then the responses, instructions are final instructions are generated through the descending tracts. Okay, you can see how it's converging over here, and then here it's diverging. See that green one is diverging like that, and then this one is kind of converging. This one coming here, that one coming there. The green and the black are coming converging onto the interneuron. Okay, so the same things we're going to use the convergence and divergent pathways to fine-tune the reflex. That's all that is. And you already know what divergent and convergent pathways are. Okay, and it's simplified. And this is simplified too. It's just showing a few. Many of them will be synapsing together. Many. Okay? And so, but here, just for simplification purposes, we show the 2 and so forth. Okay? So that's what the brain does. The brain is got the final say in these things. These reflexes are kind of generated in the spine, but the brain will fine-tune that response, that reflex. It can accentuate it, or it can tone it down, whatever needs to be. Okay, so the brain does that. So the brain is the final say, it's the control center, right? And the spinal cord does some of that stuff. It does a bit of like integration within the spine, but the final say comes from the brain. Okay, and we already know about convergent and divergent pathways, right? That's why when we do the elections, how many people do we put in Congress? A whole bunch of people, right? Because you don't want just one person to decide everything. Like that would suck. Because if they're a bad person, not a bad person, but if they're not, they may know some things, but they're not going to be a jack of all trades. That's why we have to elect a whole bunch of people. Same thing here. That's why we need to diverge and converge with a whole bunch of other neurons so that we can really process and generate a proper response. Okay? Even though our complex does nothing, but there's a bunch of them. It's about 20%, 50% rate. Okay? But that's the whole idea, is to have more people or more neurons dealing with this reflex to fine-tune it. Okay? And the brain does that. Right? So if I ask about the divergent and convergent pathways, then you'll be able to tell me about it and how those are involved with the reflexes in terms of taking information to many parts of the brain and then generating a final response. Right? So the stretch reflex is the simplest reflex ever. Why? Because the sensory neuron comes in, it doesn't synapse with an interneuron, it goes out directly as a motor neuron. You see what I'm saying? You see, you got the sensory green coming in, boom, it synapses directly with the motor neuron. So it's a simple reflex. Okay? So what happens is that in the muscle itself, you have receptors called muscle spindles, and muscle spindle will have maybe 3 to 10 muscle fibers, okay, that have this a non-contractile center. You know what I'm saying? The center that is not elastic; it doesn't stretch and do anything. Only the ends of it will. Okay. So when that muscle is being stretched, okay, this part is going to be pulled, and because it's not elastic, it's going to sense that stretch. And so the response will be to contract that muscle so that it doesn't get overstretched. So, see what I'm saying? So otherwise, if you keep stretching the muscle, you're going to start pulling the fibers apart. Okay? So the stretch reflex is generated to then contract in the opposite direction to pull. So that's why when you go to the doctor, they test the stretch reflex because it's the simplest. Okay? And you can easily demonstrate it. So you sit on a table with your thing loose, and then if you hit like that, because you're going to stretch this quadricep muscle, the response is going to be to contract it and then you shoot your leg out. Okay, stretch reflex. And, so like I said, it's 3 to 10 of the specialized muscle fibers that don't have a contractile center. Only the ends of it can stretch. Okay, so that this will feel the stretch because it's not elastic. If it's elastic, it will just go like this and give. And then so you won't feel. So, and those are called muscle spindles. Okay? That's the receptor for, and we know about muscle spindles, right? We did it when we did proprioception back then. Remember? When we did proprioception and we said muscle spindles after that. And muscle spindles will show you the location of your body part because the degree of contraction or the degree of stretch in the muscle shows exactly where my hand is. Like you can see there's a bit of tension in my bicep and my hand is here. So that's how my body will know that my hand is like this. When it's fully relaxed, my biceps, my body knows that my hand is on my side. Okay? And it's because of these spindles, muscle spindles. Okay? They will generate an opposite reaction to the stretch, which is to contract the muscle. Okay? So we know what the receptor is, and we know what the reflex is called, and we know what the parts are involved. We've only got the sensory neuron, of course the receptor, which is the muscle spindle, and then motor neuron. There's no interneuron here. It's the simplest reflex. Okay? And then muscle spindle. Alright? So that's that, and then it will generate a response by contracting the muscle. The next example is the one that was in your little module, Golgi tendon reflex. The Golgi tendon reflex is so-called because of the Golgi tendon organs, which are located where? In the tendons. Remember, like we did last time, we did that. We already did that. We already know what the Golgi tendon organs are. So the Golgi tendon organ is the receptor for this Golgi tendon organ. Okay, and it's located in the tendon. So when you're pushing weights and you're trying to lift the heavy weights to impress the girls, if you take a heavy weight, your muscle is going to start to contract, and when it contracts, what is it doing? It's going to be pulling on the tendon, on the bone, because that's what muscle contraction does, is to move the levers, which are the bones. Okay, so the Golgi tendon reflex, when it feels that too much stretch in the tendon, okay, before you rip your tendon from the bone, it's going to cause that muscle to relax. So it's the opposite of the stretch reflex. So that you do not pull the tendon from the bone, because that would really suck. It would take a long time to you can't switch it back onto the bone. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a tendon and bone, you know. So that's a very debilitating injury. So the body generates a reflex in order to avoid that. So whenever there's too much tension in the tendon, it will cause the muscle to relax, to relieve the tension. Okay? So the receptor is Golgi tendon organ, and when the muscles are contracting and they're pulling so heavily on that tendon, then the muscle will be caused to relax. Reflex action. Okay? And it's to limit tissue damage as well. So that you don't. And this is a little bit more complicated reflex. You see what I'm saying? The guys in the morning were saying, the module was saying the Golgi tendon reflex is a simple reflex. It's not really simple in that it's got interneurons in it. Okay? I know they were saying the withdrawal reflex, not this one, but the withdrawal. But the withdrawal one is an interneuron too, so it's not really simple. Okay? So anyway, so there's a sensory neuron, there's an interneuron, and then and this is inhibitory, okay? Because you want the muscle to relax. The first one was a stimulatory, because you wanted the muscle to contract and stretch reflex. Did you see that? Right? So the stretch reflex is the opposite, and the receptor is located in the tendon, not the muscle. Okay? So you don't rip the poor muscle, the poor tendon from the bone. Okay? So you know the function of this, you know the receptor involved, and you know the components involved. You gotta know that. Sometimes I'll say, okay, can you describe the Golgi tendon reflex? Okay? Tell me about the receptors involved and the sequence of events, including the components. Then you talk about the sensory neuron, of course, after receiving input from the Golgi tendon organs in the tendon, and then it will send information to the interneuron, which integrates it a little bit, and then, of course, the upper and the ascending and descending tracts. Then it will finally go into the motor neuron, and then that will control cause the muscle to relax, so that you don't apply tension on the tendon. Okay? So we've done two reflexes. Now the withdrawal reflex is the one that we were trying to say. I don't know, maybe they just got confused. I don't know whether it said that in your module. If you did it, did it say that it's a simple reflex? It's also got an interneuron, if you notice here. So the simple reflex is the stretch reflex. Okay. And what kind of receptor do we have here? Nociceptors. Or, if you don't want to be fancy, you just call them pain receptors. Right? Because if I was to step on a tag right now, if I'm barefooted or whatever, or I'm walking on the beach and I step on a shell, a sharp shell, I'm going to withdraw. You know what I'm saying? And that's to limit tissue damage, right? Because you don't want the tag or whatever is causing that pain to continue to damage the tissue there. That would be a big injury. That's no good. Okay? Normally, next time I'll probably put it in there as an example. There's what's called the crossed extensor reflex. Because, like right now, I'm walking like this, I step on a tag. If I withdraw my right leg or whichever one is got a tag in it, I'm going to have to put a stretch reflex on the other leg, right, to maintain my body weight. Otherwise, I'm going to buckle over and fall and cause more damage, you know, which will be even bad because I might hit my head. Okay, so this withdrawal reflex doesn't usually occur by itself, unless if you are removing your hand from a hot plate or something. Okay, you withdraw like that. But for the most part, it is accompanied with an opposite effect on the other side of the body. Okay, and it's called the crossed extensor reflex. I don't have it here. Okay, crossed extensor reflex. Okay, so that it will generate the opposite reaction on the other side of the body. Okay, but anyway, for these purposes, all we're talking about is the withdrawal reflex, which is fine. Okay, so that's what I'll ask you about in the exam. But I just wanted you to know that in most of the cases, this withdrawal reflex is accompanied by an opposite, reflex on the opposite side of the body. Okay, like a stretch reflex on one leg and the one that's withdrawing will withdraw. So that all my body weight is now just on my one leg. Okay? Alright, so it will have sensory neuron, it will have an interneuron. This one is excitatory because it's going to cause the muscle to contract and move away from the tendon, from the tag. Okay, so it's excitatory. Okay, it will cause the muscle to contract, as opposed to the other one that causes the muscle to relax, to relieve tension from pulling the tendon. Alright? Okay, so same homeostatic mechanism. Just to know that we get pain receptors here for nociceptors, okay, and then withdrawing purpose to limit tissue damage, right? And that's it. And that's all, folks. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I don't know what time you want to meet. If you want to meet at 2:45, and then we give exercise. Is that good? All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.